our next door neighbors and feel lucky to be able to host this event and to welcome you if you haven't been here. We are a new facility. We opened in February and we have a wide range of programming and services. Our primary service area is the neighborhood of Alston Brighton. And we are really thrilled to be able to host arts events like this as part of that work. Just a brief note of housekeeping. The restrooms are back that way by the exit sign, just through the doors at the back of the space. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Kathy King.
Hi, my name is Kathy King. I'm the Director of Education at the Ceramics Program through the Office of the Arts at Harvard. And on behalf of my co-director, Sean Panapinto, and myself, we are so honored to have Mary Frank here with us tonight. Mary Frank's work has impacted the art world for over 5 decades, and she's apparently not slowing down anytime soon from what I've experienced thus far. With work included in the permanent collections in almost every major museum in our country, as well as being elected to the American Academy of an Institute of Arts and Letters. She is indeed a national treasure. And Mary has, on a personal note, been a real hero of mine when I was a young ceramics student and kind of being adrift in a sea of Volcuses and Soldners and Arnesons. I was hungry to hear a woman's perspective in ceramic art, and the ability of Mary's sculptures to speak to both the strength and the vulnerability of the human condition, but from a woman's perspective, was something that was really wonderful to me. And she also taught me not to be categorized by materials, because we could say that Mary is considered a sculptor, a painter, a printmaker, an illustrator, a photographer, a cook, a humanitarian, a woman, a human. Mary's represented by DC Moore Gallery in New York City, as well as the Elena Zhang in Woodstock, New York. Tonight has been made possible by Ava Bride Penman for coming into my office with this idea. And we want to certainly thank Harvard Ed Portal for hosting this event, and Gallery Kayafas, where Mary's exhibition, Today is Yesterday's Tomorrow, will open tomorrow evening from 5:30 to 8 o'clock and will be on display until November 28th. So I hope you'll join Mary there. There'll be some catalogs available for purchase after the event, as well as some postcards. So without further ado, I'll stop talking now. Mary Frank.
Good evening, and nice to see you. And if you can't hear, tell me, okay? Well, news is, on the whole, not very great, but I did hear something wonderful on the radio the other day. In a school with little kids, they were all drawing, and the teacher went around looking to see what they were doing. And she asked the little girl who was drawing, what is that? What are you doing? She said, I'm drawing God. The teacher said, nobody knows what God looks like. And the girl said, they will in a minute. So that's what I would describe to, not because I want to paint God, but just to feel I know what I'm doing that much. Okay, I endlessly make lists. The general subject is what is art for, which is also like saying what are we for. So I'll read you some. And okay. To comfort the dead, to wake up the living, to mark the change of day to night, and to use oneself fully. To know that we are nature to know the migrations of stars, plants, birds, fish, insects, and mammals, and the immigrations of people. To give courage and to transform experience of pain into joy, to take nothing for granted. What can I say and what I can't say? That's hopefully in the work. A body of work is a great expression. The feet, the space between the heart, the muscle, the breath, the scream, the sigh, and love, and the connective tissue between all living beings. In Native American languages and many other languages around the world, in many traditional languages, there is no word for art. And just as well, a Hopi man said, it's what we make and it's what we need. When people make music together, they inhale. They connect their eyes, and then on the exhalation, they begin. I would love to make, draw, or paint that moment visible. Okay, I asked Kathy for a pointer. They showed me something electronic, which didn't work, but this is what I meant. And this works. I worked in wood for 15 years before I started in clay, and I'm not showing any of that because I'm already showing quite a lot. This piece is called Persephone, and it's bigger than life by some. And as you can see, it's made in sections. Okay. This piece is called Lover, also ceramic. It's also now in bronze. And this is Horse and Rider. Initially it was one horse, then it became two, but they're actually joined. And a piece of the addition of two, one of these is at the Harvard Business School, right, in the courtyard? Yeah. If you want to just go back to that for 1 second, yeah. People often ask me where, the idea or the feeling or something about the heads, because I've made so many heads, come from. And I never really knew, but somewhere I had the feeling that it was a head before separations were made among races, sometime when it was sort of all together. Yeah. This was actually somewhat based on having seen Sufi dancers who turn. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They turn by themselves, and they've traditionally certainly always been men, but they wear huge skirts, which I think are weighted a little. They're big felt skirts. And so they all turned, but while they're turning, they're also making a huge circle. And then turning is connected to the planet and to constellations, to stars. And after they've been turning for at least a half an hour, I thought maybe they'll just fall down because they'll be so dizzy. But actually they just brought their arms like this and stopped. It was very powerful. And there's a detail. Yeah. This piece is called Arching Woman, and it will be in the gallery tomorrow, at the Kayafas gallery. This is presence and absence. And all the spaces you see, sort of the square spaces, once had other images. And as I worked on it more and more, I took them out because it was too much. So I like the spaces that were left. Okay. This piece is called Messenger, and the figure on the left, I worked on sculpture and drawings and paintings of that image for a number of years. This is the season for leaf storm, right? Okay, next. I think initially this image, which I've used a lot, of kind of canyon image, was from having actually been in New Mexico and seeing for the first time actually canyons. To be walking on a flat place and not seeing the canyon at all, and then to be at the edge of it, and then there's this whole other world down there. Yeah. This is in '96, but I think years before I started doing images, which included images of boats that were wrecked or half-wrecked, or people often without any oars in a boat. In other words, no locomotion except their own bodies. And of course now, that's what we're looking at so much, right? People trying to escape from one place to some kind of safety. And there's a large series of walled images. Some of them are like labyrinths, some are mazes, and some are just walls. In this case, they become part of the inside of the body. These were all little paintings that got put together and then finally got put on a book of Sharon Olds, the poet, wonderful poet, and she wanted this to cover the book. And here are the walls again with a creature who appears many, many times. Or was it like this? That's the title. And I think it probably comes from, I can't think of her first name, Han Kingston, the Chinese writer. Maxine, right. And the book Chinaman. And she wrote about her father's experiences, which she didn't really know. She said he took, excuse me, the exams, the imperial exams, which consisted of being in a room, this would have been years and years ago, that had a hook on the ceiling, and he had the long pigtail, because that was traditional, and he worked so hard to be able to pass the exams, and the hook, he realized, was so he wouldn't fall asleep, so he put the pigtail on the hook, so every time his head would go down, he would be woken up. And then she wrote, or was it like this? And then she gave another story of aspects of his life. And she was really trying to figure them out. She was trying to figure out her own background. This painting is the date that started the Iraq War. It was the only painting I've ever done in a day. Anyhow, a good-sized painting. And I remember being so enraged I'm sure many of you remember demonstrations, endless and really, I think, very powerful demonstrations, which were, of course, paid attention to, not only in this country, all over the world. And I really felt like, I don't know, throwing bricks through glass or whatever. And then I finally just started, that's what came out. This is a closed triptych. So that's a painting that this is, I think, 48 by 48. And then it opens in the middle, and there will be 2 at the gallery tomorrow, and people can open them and close them. So there's a different image inside, yeah. So that's the inside, and you're seeing it, you know, partially open, mostly open. And I found it a very intriguing way to work because it allowed me to have different girls that sometimes connected and sometimes really not. But also then you could close half. And when I showed them, I guess at the Newberger Museum, I showed a lot of them. And it was interesting to me to see people, they were sort of almost inside them, closing them one side, the other side, opening them, looking over to another and seeing maybe images that connected. This is the outside of another triptych. And that's the inside. I think triptychs existed initially for monks because they could carry around a bigger painting that would be easy to carry around, because by closing it, of course, it became smaller. And some of them, from Ethiopia, very ancient ones, are very small and very beautiful. Okay. Another triptych called Ever. And this one is at Kayafas, called Ballad. And this was a field I used to see a lot where I lived before. And actually I painted it in the summer, remembering the winter, remembering the snow in an apple orchard. And this is encaustic, which means with wax. And also this. And the image on the right is what I thought of as a little child, as where the baby was in the mother. I didn't know that it was all curled up, so I figured the arms were in the arms, the legs were in the legs. This is also encaustic. Encaustic is some of the most ancient painting. And when Egypt was Roman, all the heads of the mummies were encaustic paintings, and they're mostly in very perfect condition now. The Greeks must have had a lot of bees and a lot of honey because they painted their boats with wax, which I guess sealed the wood very well. Also encaustic. This, and then there'll be maybe some details of this and others. I had a show in New York at DC Moore some years ago with a lot of portraits. And there were portraits, well, you'll see in a minute, but this one is called Looking at Velasquez, because the dwarfs, 1, 2, 3, yeah. I mean, he's extraordinary altogether, but he had a freedom in painting the dwarfs that, of course, he didn't have in painting royalty. And the idea of having a dwarf sitting with the legs coming at you, which, of course, foreshortens them even more. And you can't see it probably in this, but they weren't really to be touched, and that was true of royalty also. Beside the sleeves of the clothes that even the princess wore was another piece of cloth that hung down. And so if somebody wanted to get her attention or touch her, they couldn't touch her, they could touch this piece, right? How removed can you get? And this is an overview of portraits of living people, of people who died, of real people, friends, children, actors, all different people, also people that I imagined, and then some pictures based on Velasquez, the great portrait of Aesop that he did, who was considered at the time a very ugly man. I thought he was wonderful looking. And I was very happy because none of them were framed, and I do love work without frames and glass. And I was hoping they would have, you could see a corner, and I was hoping they could sort of talk to each other. This is a detail, yeah. That's a great friend, Lily Santangelo, who I brought up to Harvard years ago when I did a life drawing. Yeah, I had people working all together on the floor on 25-foot pieces of paper. They were sort of horrified because she was moving all the time, very, very slowly, tiny incremental movement. And they were used to drawing a live model absolutely still. So it was sort of shocking. But they did actually interesting work after they got over the idea that as they were drawing, somebody else who was next to them on the floor was going to infringe on their drawing, right? Horrible. And when they got over that, it was very interesting. We put them up on walls, and they became these really terrific friezes, because everybody was seeing her from a different angle, and she was moving. Yeah. This is Alvin Epstein, wonderful actor. And that's based on the Velasquez Aesop. I mean, it's a full portrait. That's just the head. That was enough for me to deal with. And that's Peter Matheson down here, who I did a book with, which I really love, called Shadows of Africa. And he was a great writer, naturalist, fiction, non-fiction, and political activist. Yeah. This one's at the gallery also. And it probably comes from years ago, years before I did this, seeing a wax clay head, and then another little figure that I'd made, which wasn't part of it, but they were on the shelf together, and somehow it interested me a lot, the switch of scale. And this is me on the floors a few years ago in my studio. And you see a bit of paintings after a show I had in Woodstock, Elena Zhang. I just started painting on the floor, different images, heads, ships, landscapes, other heads, trees, whatever. For no reason, with no idea of any future. It was really just to do it, and it was a freedom, and it was a pleasure. And then I gardened a lot. I began bringing flowers in, putting them down, and they look really nice on the painted floor. And then I began putting small sculptures down, and then I began tripping on them. And I didn't really want to wreck them. And then I went to the drugstore and bought a camera. I had really never photographed before, and I started photographing them and taking them into the drugstore to see what it looked like. And I got very, very intrigued with using different elements of my work and also natural phenomena, water, leaves, branches, rocks, a lot of rocks. And so what you'll see now, I think comes next, right? Yeah, are photographs. And that's, I've been doing a lot in the last probably 5 years or 6. Yeah. This is called a series of heads, Alas. And that's called Never. I'm using burnt wood, and this is a raccoon piece with milkweed, which it turns out we need desperately because they're killing the milkweed, and so there are very few monarchs. They're also, of course, cutting down the trees where they go in Mexico. And that's the head you saw before that was on the floor, but then the black was put around it. And the drawing is based on a no mask. The no masks are very amazing. They took wood and they soaked the wood for 20 years, then they dried it for another 20 years, that's 40. And then someone started carving it. So maybe it was the grandchild who was carving it from the person who initially thought of making the mask. And that's a leaf under a stencil. And that one is called East of My Childhood. And the piece, oh, okay, let me just go back a second. The piece behind is what I call shadow papers. I showed them once, a whole show of them. They have to use electric lights, but this is just the paper against a window with light coming through. And nothing of the paper is cut out. It's torn or cut into, but the paper is still one piece, actually. And that's a tree outside the window, the green that you see. A tree in Berlin, actually. And this is a very nice Brazilian young man who was working with me for a while. But it's in the stencil of what I call a creature. So they're both really of him. Trying to remember the names. It's called Just This. And that one's called San Miguel. And its paper's floating on water. And this is called Herself. It's part of a series of images through water. And that became a cover of a book of poetry by Susan Sindel. And this is probably just what I feel is going on now. And where I am for half the year is bluestone country, so there are all these bluestone striates, and one huge piece of stone could have thousands, and they split very easily just with weather, but you can also split them easily. And that's what these are painted on. Okay. Okay, comes the revolution. It is a revolution. It's the revolution of cooking with the sun. This image is Darfur refugees in Chad, and the main umbrella organization for all over the world is called Solar Cookers with an S, .org. And you can look up and see wonderful videos now in many parts of the world, I think in 140 countries. I've been working for them as a volunteer for about 25 years, maybe more. And it is very extraordinary. This is a refugee camp, Darfur refugees, but in Chad, and the UN brings food in, but there's really almost no fuel. So we could live probably okay eating ice cream and salads and cold cuts, but most of the world can't live at all because they eat grains mainly, and there's not a single grain that you can eat raw no matter who you are. They're very cheap. The women made these cookers. They brought the materials in, which was very difficult because they were bombing all around the capital where the plane came in. But the women got paid to make them and then taught other women to make them. And you can cook everything under the sun, including purifying water. Okay. That's in Bangladesh, where many people are living in the huge delta, which is often flooded. And she has a parabolic cooker, so she can cook large amounts of food and also faster. Yeah. And this picture was taken over 12 years ago. And I should have one for right now. You would see no green, and people would be carrying really garbage sticks because the forest is gone in so many places. And here's the village, and here was the forest, and then it was here, and then it was probably like past Brookline. So women walk 20 miles and sleep out, and men know where they are, and they're either taking someone else's wood, anyhow they're raped all the time with their daughters, and that's who goes to look for wood. Okay. That's a child being given a glass of tea. And actually men who in many traditional societies, parts of the world, never cook except ritually. But they do have tea houses, and they're very happy using solar cookers to make tea in many places. This is sort of a graphic example because that's the wood that she would have used for one meal. And that's the solar cooker. It cost about $30. Also, you can make it yourself. They give you the, instructions. Very simple to make. You can use old cardboard boxes and we'd have to buy the aluminum paper. But the chicken is significant because she doesn't have to buy wood or get wood. She can buy a chicken or a goat and have eggs and milk. Okay? This is in India, and that's thousands of solar cookers before the students came, when in January over 4,000 students were taught one day outside Mumbai. And I think the pressure of teaching such a quantity of kids, not just girls, boys, to cook with solar cookers is because so many people are dying from the pollution. So you see the next picture. That's the picture of a detail of all the kids who cooked curry and rice, ate it, and went home with a free cooker. I was very impressed. And that's the last photograph, called Sky. So if you have questions. No question. Yeah, what?
Are you still using the materials in caustic? Are you still using those materials that you did a while ago?
Yeah, sometimes, not as much right now, but I go back and forth often between things, yeah. I don't know if you heard the question, it was whether I'm still using caustic. Yeah.
Hi, Mary. Is there a way that people here can participate in that solar cooker to support that, to spread the word?
Yeah, just go to solarcookers.org and you'll see videos and you'll see what you can get and you can see what you can do. And
so you can give money and things like that.
What?
You can give money.
You can give money, you can talk about it, you can do all kinds of things. You'll see it's a very big website and you'll see pictures in many, many parts of the world now. Videos and pictures and writing. And you could look all week at it actually, yeah, which is wonderful. What?
I'll make one more comment actually.
Yeah.
My wife has a gallery where Mary shows at. And over the last 4 days, I've watched it evolve. And it's evolved in such an interesting way, a Mary way. It was organic. It started off sort of very logical, and then it grew and it got more complicated. And it's really worth, if you go, to spend time, not just walk through it, but hang around.
Any other questions? Anyone else?
Yeah.
I just imagine that you have always been free to make whatever images you want. Have you ever struggled?
Fall down flat on my face today, Chris. I can't believe it.
Well, you blow me away.
Always. What?
You blow me away.
Well, you're still here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always trouble. Yeah. Sometimes I paint in anchovy tins or sardine tins, or sometimes I do things like that. Which I paint. I think there's some mushrooms in the show. What's called artist fungi in mushroom books, and then the mushrooms shelf polypores. They come out this way on trees, and they're glued on with industrial glue, but it's mushroom glue. And they can be quite big or small, and sometimes they're lots on a tree, and they're killing the tree. So I'm doing a favor to anyone whose tree I take the mushrooms off. But you can draw on them with your fingernail or with a pin or anything you want, and they oxidize when they're fresh. So it's a beautiful thing to draw on. And I draw sometimes on leaves and on rocks and things. Those things are maybe a little less of a struggle, okay? You are kidding. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Mary. I heard you speak in the 1980s, and it was wonderful, and it's just so excited to see you again. But I'm just wondering if you're still working with clay.
I'm not, really, no. I mean, I might do some work with paper clay, Adobe. I'm beginning to do that a bit, but I am focused on a lot making things for the photographs. So when I photograph, I'm always repainting something or changing something. Yeah.
I'm sorry, there's a question back here. I'll bring the mic up front.
Okay.
Hi, Mary. I'd love to know how you met John Cohen, who did your fabulous documentary.
He lived next door. We shared a fire escape on 3rd Avenue. And I knew him well, and he knew my work from over 50 years. Yeah. He knew my children. Yeah. Yeah. He's a very interesting man.
So ever since I've known you, you've been passionate about these solar cookers,
Yeah.
Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder in your mind how that passion has impacted the work that you're doing over such a broad spectrum of time and materials, but it always seems to be there.
Well, I only know about them since 25 or 30 years. They hardly existed before. That's when they really began. And then they had mainly one design. It was a box within a box, and you could cook 14 pounds of food at a time. But they weren't easily transportable the way ones you saw here weigh about a pound. They go in a backpack that can be shipped all over. But I don't understand the question exactly. I mean, it's what I do. I mean, I don't make paintings of solar cookers, but it's the world, because otherwise it's always me and my ideas, my thoughts, my criticisms, my this, my that, right? But there's a world out there, and I think particularly women all over are having more voice than they ever have, and they have to have much more, but everybody. I mean, what's the point of having a voice if you don't use it? Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. I know you don't take your camera to the neighborhood drugstore anymore, so do you do digital? And
It's digital, and a friend of mine, actually, Alan Huffman, does digital printing. Yes, I don't print them.
I have kind of a two-part question. I'm just impressed with how prolific you are over your
I'm sorry, could you talk a little
Oh,
louder?
yes. I have kind of a two-part question. I'm just impressed with how prolific you are over your whole lifespan. And I was wondering kind of what your daily rhythm looks like and how you nurture yourself as a creative person.
It's a bit chaotic, but I try to work, pretty much every day. Sometimes it could be a lot, sometimes less. And I don't travel a lot, but what I do, I usually draw a lot. I mean, I draw a lot anyhow, but that's what you can, drawing is magnificent because you don't need to plug into anything. You have a pencil or pen or whatever, and you can draw on a lot of things beside paper. So, does that help?
Yep.
And it's a huge source, drawing. It's like and writing sometimes things that I can't draw. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
A favorite what?
A favorite one of anything?
Ooh. That's like asking someone who has 6 children who their favorite is.
That's what I figured.
Yeah. No, I mean, if I'm working on something and it's not absolutely impossible, then maybe if it's not my favorite, it's what the energy is going toward. But I have things from the past that I do love, and I couldn't do them now, no matter what. I mean, I couldn't. But I couldn't do what I'm doing now in the past. So that's, yeah.
Thank you.
So now that you're working with digital cameras, how often do you think about working, well, for instance, drawing on the iPad or any of the other technical
No, I
stuff?
haven't done any of that. I don't know if I would, but I mean, I do love to draw on paper or other things. So
Right, since you said you draw on leaves and slate, and,
It's true, I might, but I haven't yet, yeah. No, for me it was a huge, not just a leap, a really dangerous feeling to do anything digital because I'm not really, it's not my
I know.
normal world. Yeah.
Right, but I wondered if you were
Yeah.
beginning to get intrigued by it.
Not yet.
Okay.
These collages that you put together for the photographs, do you keep them or do they disassemble after?
It's all gone.
It's all gone.
All
It's
gone.
very
I mean, the elements maybe are there, and some of them are gone, but no. No, that's what led me to take the photographs.
Yeah.
There was no way to keep it, yeah.
And what is the size of the photograph when you have it printed?
I forget what they are, 24 by 30.
16 1/4 by 21 3/4.
You could come up here. That's great. I do love to collaborate when I get a chance, whether it's a book or doing book covers for fiction, non-fiction, poetry. It's a pleasure.
Mary, does it drive you crazy to name things? Or
Yeah, often.
okay.
Often, yeah. And it drives other people crazy because I changed the name. But I don't do it in order to drive people crazy. It just strikes me that that name was stupid and this would be a better one. I know it's hard, but I think for some people it's not hard. Some people it's sort of natural.
Do you think it's important that they have names?
Yes and no. Some of it is just sheer identification, certainly, because otherwise you're talking about 40 images of a woman like this, right? Or an antelope like that, or whatever. But sometimes I think I don't want to be too descriptive. I don't want to tell people what they're seeing, because I have been very surprised by what people see in my work. Very. Sometimes humorous, sometimes terrible, sometimes all different things that I had no idea are there. So, and I mean, I could clarify things by describing them more, as many people do with titles, but I would rather not, yeah. Yeah.
So Mary, thinking about the piece at Harvard Business School that you did, do you ever think that you'll do another piece of public sculpture?
I didn't do a piece of public sculpture.
It just became one.
It became one, yeah. No, I had no idea. I was quite surprised.
But just think that how fortunate for Harvard Business School to have a piece of your work so long ago, and now to have you here after the whole body of work that you have done.
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
Perhaps it will lighten the captains of industry.
Oh.
That was the idea.
That would be good. Wow. They could use some. Yeah.
Can you tell some of us who don't know the story of how the piece came to be at the Harvard Business School?
I don't think I know.
Okay, maybe this
You
lady
know.
knows.
Oh, I know, yeah. But you probably don't remember me. I'm Kathleen Dolan.
You are.
Yeah, and so I'm the one that made sure that piece got placed there at Harvard Business School. Mary, it was very controversial. You know, you weren't sure at the time, and I don't know if you remember, whether you wanted a piece at Harvard Business School, and that was only an edition of 3, and you had had 2 made in New York, and bronze pieces made that were owned by private collectors, and that's the only one that's in a public space.
Yeah, it is.
And so I'm very, 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 very happy to see it there, and I know that the students appreciate it. Many
It's
of
good.
them.
Very good.
It's in front of Morgan Law. And you know, there are very, very few public sculptures anywhere on Harvard University campus.
I didn't know. Yeah.
So this was quite a coup for the university to make this decision to do that, and I'm extremely proud that I was part of that process.
Good for you. I think I've always heard that in many cases, public places, banks or schools or different institutions do not want figurative work for various reasons. They don't want it graffitied on, but also they don't want people saying this is really like horrible sex, or this is really morbid, it's about death. Or, whereas I love abstract work, but they prefer to have abstract art for those reasons. Because they feel that people can't, first of all, they won't attack it so much, and there's not going to be discussion about who's naked and who's not. It's pretty funny when you think of all the Victorian sculpture around with people, you know, really naked dancing around. Yeah.
What has always interested me about the photographs is that they really afford an opportunity to appreciate the interplay between the representation and the materials and or the objects. Would you comment about that?
Well, I'm glad if that's true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was teaching a lot, sculpture and drawing, and I always told, particularly the sculpture students, I said, you're materialists, you know, whether you think you are or not, you are dealing with some kind of material. And you better really think about that and think and feel what it is you're dealing with, whether it's clay or stone or wood or metal or paper or whatever it is that you're making something out of. So I am interested in materials and just the whole surface of the earth. A lot of work of mine in the past, particularly if people are standing, they're usually standing on a curve, which is what I think the earth is. Maybe now you know everything.
Well, I invite everyone to continue the conversation, maybe out near the refreshments and to help yourself. And please do feel free to go next door to the ceramics program and look in the gallery there if you like. And we just all want to thank Mary Frank for being with us tonight. This was incredible.